So, hi everyone, welcome to Digital Hollywood's panel on the disruption, media, platforms, and advertising. My name is Anne-Marie O'Neill. I'm the CEO of Whale Rock Industries, and I'll be your moderator for today. We have an amazing panel for you today, and I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves briefly and throw the mic to the next person. So I will kick us off. A little about Whale Rock. We are an LA-based strategic consulting company. On the consulting side, we help brands grow by thinking like an entertainment company. And our strategies come from real life experience in the other divisions of our business. We produce TV shows, including BattleBots, which is about to air this week on Discovery, and others on Netflix, HBO Max, etc. We're launching a sci-fi podcasting company, and we also run several digital consumer brands. So with that, I'll throw over to Kim.
Well, thank you very much. I'm Kim Hurwitz, Chief Marketing Officer of Fight. We're a global digital platform that offers a device agnostic way to stream your favorite combat sports, as well as other types of entertainment. We do a lot with music, motorsports, basketball, tennis, various things, but combat sports is our sweet spot, been around about 6 years. This year, we were acquired by Triller and their suite of companies. And then more recently, we've been in the news about reverse merger news that'll be happening sometime this year. We work with pay-per-view business model, but we also have subscriptions and AVOD content as well. I've been in the pay-per-view and TV space for many, many years, former head of pay-per-view at DirecTV, and worked with Karate Combat. And I'm a fighter and a musician myself. So I get to work at what I love to do. So how about over to Justin?
Justin, you're on mute.
Did it, first one.
You're the first one, you're the winner today.
Center square on your Zoom bingo card for sure. Hi everyone, I'm Justin Fromm. I am head of research at LG Ads. LG Ads is the ad sales arm for the connected TV inventory on LG televisions. It was the combination of LG and Alfonso, which was a television and CTV data and research company that's been around for about a decade. So I lead research for the team. I've been in the industry for decades at ABC and Hulu, and then working with a lot of the folks on this panel. My last job at Advertiser Perceptions. It's great to be here. I'll throw to John next.
Thank you, Justin. My name is John Steinloff. I am Chief U.S. Advertising Sales Officer for Discovery, Inc., and I'm responsible for all of the ad revenue generation for our 16 U.S. linear cable channels and all of the digital extensions of them in our new one-year-old streaming service, Discovery Plus.
You want to throw to the next person, John?
Okay. Who is next?
Let's go with Natalie.
Natalie.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Natalie Gabithaler Scully. I am SVP of Revenue and Distribution Operations at Vivo. We're the world's leading music video network. We see about 25 billion views globally across desktop, mobile, and television each month. In my role, I oversee monetization across platforms and the execution of our apps and FAST channels across our various TV partners globally. I'll pass it on to Sarah.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Sarah Rosen. I am the head of U.S. Entertainment and News Partnerships at Twitter. We work with content partners across the globe to help them bring their content to Twitter and then monetize it via Twitter Amplify. We work closely with a couple of folks on this panel and pretty much every other content partner you can think of across sports, news, and entertainment. And I'm excited to be here. Brian, it's you.
Thanks, Sarah. I'll round this out. Hello, everybody. Brian Benedict. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer at Odyssey, which is one of the leading U.S. audio platforms. You may know us well as one of your favorite radio stations. We have hundreds of radio stations in the US, a big streaming platform with the Odyssey app, millions of podcasts that we host, sports play-by-play, sports betting. So it's become quite a diversified company over the last few years through some acquisitions and some mergers. And so been in the audio space for 25 years or so at iHeartMedia, at Spotify, and a couple of others. So this is kind of a culmination of that journey, and very excited to be here. And I think, Anne-Marie, back to you.
Thank you, guys. So, okay, let's get into it. Our topic is broad: disruption in media platforms and advertising. So disruption by its very nature is tough to predict, right? But I'm going to ask you to do it anyway. So imagine this panel 1 year from now. What are the top 1 to 2 disruptors that you see altering the media landscape in 2022? What will this panel be discussing in January 2023? So what experiences massive growth this year? What's going to fall by the wayside, and why? I'll throw to you, Justin. Have you got an answer for this one?
Sure do. So, I think one of the things that we'll see this year is the thinning out of the number of OTT streaming services. That space is really quite crowded. Obviously, it's where consumers are going for their television viewing, and I think what we're going to see is that just the need to have sufficient scale will have a bunch of those come together to create real opportunities for advertisers. Right now, what we see is there's so much overlap in the subscription across those services. One of the big challenges for advertisers is to find unique audiences. So I think that's going to be kind of one of the big changes. Last year was the big change in lots of consumers moving to streaming. I think this year we'll see that industry come together a little bit more.
That poses particular challenges for people like John, who are working in a space where, Discovery Plus is obviously a fairly recent player in the space. John, how do you feel about what the disruptors are going to look like this year?
Well, I agree. Streaming continues to be the disruptor for what I would call the traditional television business. Ours, Discovery Plus, I mentioned earlier, today's our first anniversary. Very happy with how it went the first year. I'll talk more about that as we go through the panel, but I'm not sure. I agree with Justin that there'll be aggregation of streaming services. We've seen that from Disney with the Disney bundle, where they're selling at a discount a package of their own apps: Disney Plus, Hulu, AVOD, and ESPN Plus. So there may be more opportunities. Peacock has gotten together with WWE, so there could be some opportunistic type of packaging of apps, but I think a lot of us now are trying to study the data. We get data every day. We have our own Nielsen on Discovery Plus. We wake up in the morning, we know exactly what everybody, the tens of millions of people that have access to Discovery Plus, we know exactly what they watched, how many hours. Deep into the library, we've got 55,000 assets on Discovery Plus. So that will disrupt. Disruption is not just to television. Disruption is to motion pictures. The windowing of motion pictures has been a really interesting trend to follow with the day and date trend. I think people are just studying their own data, trying to figure out how to monetize it, how to get the most subscribers, how to keep churn in check, which is another big factor. So I would say that's one to watch. And if I had to say what won't fall by the wayside, I'll take this question of what won't fall by the wayside. I don't think the cable bundle is crumbling anytime soon. We've seen some moderate losses as the years go by, but there's still 84 million American households that are subscribing to some form of paid cable. And I think what holds that together is the people who love television see it as value. They want everything. The people who love sports, they can't live without the cable bundle. And then there are, I would say, the upscale, the more affluent household who just says, I want the best television experience on my new, 85-inch LG television, or whatever it is that they have. So I think the bundle gets a ton of criticism, and streaming gets a lot of great press. But I think there's a balance there.
Interesting too that, it said video killed the radio star, but obviously audio is back with a vengeance and growing in ways that none of us could have probably anticipated several years ago, except perhaps you, Brian. What do you see happening from a disruption point of view in 2022?
Yeah, thanks, Anne-Marie. One of the reasons I think that audio is going through a bit of a renaissance is the medium itself is sort of catching up to where video has been, and particularly the digital community has been, which is the content's getting more personalized. The recommendation engines are getting better. So for consumers, to come into these audio platforms and have an experience of discovery and recommendation, it's just so much better, than it used to be 10 years ago. So I think there's a big sort of discovery process, going on there inside of audio. And of course, that's translating to marketers as well. Marketers have many more options now within audio to get creative, to use some of the tools that they're used to in the digital community. It's interesting. I come, Anne-Marie, from a company before I was at Odyssey that was in the metaverse space. And so you talk about disruptors, NFTs and crypto and metaverse, all that is very experimental right now. So I think there's a lot of noise going on in the media community about it, but I think brands are sort of dipping their toe in the water with all of that. I think we'll be talking about it probably more loudly in January of 23, but I'm not sure it's going to really build a marketplace for probably another 5 years or so, but that's something I'm watching quite closely as well.
And Sarah, in the social media obviously is a constant disruptor. The new platforms coming in with every new wave or every new generation of youth. Are we going to see anything in the social media space that you think will be disruptive in 2022, or any other thoughts across media?
I think when it comes to, at least at Twitter, we're going to continue to see what we have been seeing, which is as the content landscape continues to get more complicated or more diverse, they're coming to Twitter. Fans are coming to Twitter to crave a community and still want to connect with people to talk about what they're watching, what they're listening to, what they saw in the theaters or streaming. And so I think what we'll see more of from at least the Twitter side of the house is leaning into communities and interests and making sure that Twitter is an easy place for fans to connect with one another, because regardless of what platform it's on or how they're consuming it, if it's a live TV, whether it's an award show or a sporting event, if it's a show on one of the streaming networks, if it's a podcast everyone's been loving, or if it's using an audio platform like Twitter Spaces, people still crave that connection around common interests. And so we'll be doing a lot more in that space to make it easy for people to do that on Twitter.
And Kim, so looking at a world where you're really, a streamer in all kinds of different media touch points in your world, but from a very strong perspective in the fight space. So what does that look like for 2022 when you're not necessarily a broad audience streamer, but more of a niche audience?
Well, I mean, we have expanded into other verticals, so we'll continue to do that, especially with our parent company, Triller, because that's a social media app, right, with music roots. I think that we will see more and more of it. I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation, not just on the big partners, but content consolidation. I think you're going to see a lot of companies buying other entities. Look at Peacock, for example. One of the biggest drivers of their new customers was when they did the deal with WWE. And they just had some stories that were out there today. Almost, 1 million of the 1.1 million WWE subscribers migrated over to the Peacock platform. And then they got more people going, oh, I'll check this out. So I think that you're going to see a lot of that. And so you'll see even more pay-per-view events, more subscriptions, more free offerings on a platform like Fight. But I also think it's not just going to be traditional streamers or television networks. I think social networks like Twitter the way that they kind of grow is that they behave more like a network too. People already spend hours per day. If you look at anyone who has, friends or children who are Gen Z, you see how they behave. That's one way that I think you're going to see some of the lines blurring.
And Natalie, where do you see things disrupting in 2022 from where you sit at Vivo? You're on mute.
Thank you. Second to do it today. I think we're going to continue to see more blurred lines on CTV between linear and on-demand experiences, sort of the AVOD space. I also think personalization is another point of differentiation, and the retention of the user experience and ad innovation on CTV, thinking about appealing to like mass audiences and having that unique tailored experience so that you can really be relevant to every viewer in that mass audience space.
Yeah, so it's from what you're all describing, I mean, one of the common themes here is that it's harder than ever to break through the noise, right? So I think, the audience looking at this would love to hear some specifics and examples and insights from this panel on how you've innovated to stay ahead with the constant change in what audiences are consuming. I will throw it around here, but I'll start with you, Kim. How have you innovated?
Well, one of the things that has really helped us, and really the COVID pandemic happening kind of accelerated our growth, as I'm sure many of our businesses here, streaming actually benefited and forced us to innovate and broaden our base and be more cost effective. The one thing that really made a big difference for us that we started about 1.5 years ago was working with an affiliate network. And it was a way of partnering with media and influencers and giving them a stake in our success. So if, we didn't tell them what to write or how to say it, we're going to let them have that, editorial integrity. But if they included links, to our service, we would pay them a commission for anything that converted into sales. And it's been one of our most cost-effective ways of expanding and growing our base.
That's terrific. Any other examples out there? Brian, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just add, Emery, we, at Odyssey, in terms of, trying to break through the noise and really drive innovation, we reimagined our entire company around this concept. Entercom was the former company and brand before Odyssey, and it was a longtime US linear radio leader, frankly, for the last 30, 40 years. Over the last 5 to 10 years, though, we've seen audiences migrating, I think, as Natalie was saying, over to, digital channels. And we started to say, hey, we need to really look at our portfolio of assets a bit differently. So we went on an acquisition spree, a merger journey, and came up with frankly, a brand new company during the pandemic. And so we kind of decided, hey, we needed to, redo this entire brand to reflect what the new company is. And so this Odyssey brand is only 10 months old. As I said at the beginning, it's outside of linear radio. It's filled with big streaming app, podcasts, sports betting. And so all of that was a lot of hard work over the last 2 years. And so I guess the answer to the question really is we kind of flipped our entire company on its head. And we realized that in order to, play in this new environment for the next 20, 30 years, the company had to be rebuilt. And that's what we did.
That's a big one. Any other innovations, John?
Looking at the streaming service business allows you more creativity for your advertisers. So I'll give you one example. We have a lot of holiday programming in linear, and being in the streaming service business for the first time these last few weeks during the holidays, we created an entire hub. We called it Holiday Central on Discovery Plus, and our partnership with Kohl's, the department store Kohl's, came to another level by taking a lot of the holiday programming, having them sponsor it, they're a licensee of the Food Network brand. So how do you break through? You have the Food Network brand become your culinary lead product as a licensed product at the retail level and in e-commerce. And you allow Kohl's to use the shoppable capabilities that streaming offers. So somebody could be watching Food Network or HGTV holiday programming on Discovery Plus. It could be limited commercial interruption brought to you by Kohl's. They could have the first ad, they could have exclusive pods, but people can shop and buy the Food Network branded product from Kohl's on our streaming service in holiday programming. So commerce is another area that streaming allows us to get into that is not easy to do in traditional.
Natalie, it looked like you had something to say.
Yeah, I think we sort of looked at it in two areas. One was expansion of our distribution. I think we're now on 37 TV partners globally today, focusing on the fast channels and app distribution, which I think, from an advertiser side, that ad spend on Vivo is diversified. There's no oversaturation on one platform or audience. And then on the consumer side, we're delivering our content where the users are and giving it to them whenever, wherever, and however they want it. I think the other piece that we've focused on the advertising side is making sure that we've got that white glove service, right? We're working with each brand and understanding their needs and KPIs, working with them on brand safety and brand suitability, but then also offering them unique products with having all of this content and these offerings across these different distribution platforms. We put together unique products like moods, where an advertiser can target based on the mood of a video, or rewind, where an advertiser can target based on top videos in a decade or genre. And then I think lastly, layering on data and measurement with that, partnering with innovative data measurement partners to help sort of report on incremental reach. And that's been important for us, and I think has helped us kind of break through that noise and differentiate ourselves in the market.
Terrific. Anyone else want to talk about some innovations, or should we move on to another topic? Justin?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that we've heard from a couple of the panel, my co-panelists here, is, in some ways, innovation was foisted upon us in the last year, right? By having to meet consumers where they were, and consumers having to kind of manage through this incredible pandemic, and us continuing to be here, right? Shaped some significant changes in media, and all of us have had to really respond to that. And here we are, 20 months out, and you can see all the ways that we've responded. The innovation, like Brian was saying, LG Ads was kind of born out of the need and the changes that were happening in the marketplace. And then what we've seen happen as consumption through streaming and adoption of streaming has grown, as Kim and John were talking about, is the need for incremental audiences to be able to measure innovatively. So we've created new innovative measurements. We've worked with, other advertising partners, as Natalie's pointing out, kind of white glove service to help them manage through, to really help understand and move away from a content-based approach of advertising, which was kind of okay when there were a few streamers to add to your linear schedule. But by moving to a device-centric approach, where advertisers can partner with devices, OEMs like ourselves, like the Samsungs and Vizios of the world, and then ensure that they manage their reach and frequency as effectively as possible. And that's another way that we've done this. I think that's another change that really has come foisted upon us, is that challenge in managing our clients' media budgets effectively and efficiently.
Great. Sarah, do you have anything to add?
Twitter has innovated as a product. We launched audio in 2021 with Twitter Spaces. I think to answer the question slightly differently and not as Twitter as a platform and where we've innovated, I also think it's worth mentioning in our partnerships team, what we really focus on is as our partners are going through these evolutions, listening to our partners and working to be the best possible platform partners that we can. The landscape is also quite complicated when it comes to platforms, as we touched on, and there isn't a roadmap given to these content partners of here's what to do on Twitter, here's what to do on Facebook, on Instagram, on Pinterest, on TikTok. And so we view a huge part of our role is to give the Twitter playbook and help our partners take the evolutions that they're working on in their own businesses and the challenges that they have, and support them in being as successful as possible on Twitter with whatever the latest and greatest product updates are, or tips and tricks, or trends we're seeing from users. And so our big role is to support these guys as they're going through major challenges in their own businesses.
And Sarah, on that note, what questions are you most asked by publishers and brands trying to grow or monetize on your platforms, especially questions that have come up out of 2021?
I mean, I think the most common question is, how do I go viral? Is probably what's
your response?
If I knew the answer, or if there was a single recipe, I would live a really good life. The answer is, I mean, all jokes aside, that is a question we get. You know, how do I blow up? How do I get a tweet to go off? How do I go viral? And the answer is, if you think about who some of the most memorable brands are on Twitter, whether it's Wendy's or Taco Bell or HBO or Netflix, the reason that they're successful on Twitter, the number one reason, is because they have an authentic voice that they stay true to on Twitter, and they serve their fans and their users on Twitter in a consistent, authentic way. So whether that's the tone that they take with, you know, snarky tweets or funny mentions, whether it's the content that they give their followers on a regular basis, they're not just pumping out promo videos, they're actually giving extra content, extra footage, behind the scenes interviews, and they're also constantly inserting themselves in conversations about what's happening in the world, because Twitter is very much about what's happening right now at this moment. And sometimes that doesn't have anything to do with you as a brand, whether a brand is an advertiser or a brand is a content provider, but there is always a way for you to become part of that conversation. So we sort of guide our partners on, here's how to be relevant every day of the year, regardless if you have a launch or not. And here's how to think about being authentic to truly who you are and the voice of your brand. And that's the recipe for success on Twitter.
And going viral.
Sure, yes.
Or alternatively,
I mean, it's a great, I mean, a good example is even our own Twitter handle at Twitter. When Facebook and Instagram were down and everyone was talking about the fact that they needed to go to Twitter, there was one simple tweet that @Twitter tweeted, which was hello, literally everyone. And there's nothing special about those words in a tweet other than it's well-timed, it's in the true voice of the @Twitter handle. And, you know, it just hit in the right moment and it blew up. And that's really, you know, even our own handle doesn't go viral all the time. So it's very much about being part of what's happening in that moment and finding a way to give your authentic take on it.
I think we can all relate to the desire to go viral on a social media platform, but are there other kind of questions that publishers, advertisers, or audience members ask you guys frequently? Anyone else on the panel who's answering questions for clients or advertisers or audience members about what they can do better with your platforms?
I get a very common question from our promoters, especially if they're brand new. They say, okay, we're going to do something on pay-per-view. How many buys am I going to get? Number one question. It's kind of equivalent to how do I go viral? And the answer is, well, there's a lot of reasons why. Do you know your audience? Can you leverage your audience? If it's pay-per-view, it has to be priced right. And do we have rights? Can we go international? You know, that there's so many things. And I think international, because we haven't really touched on that here, and maybe not all of you are a national, you probably are. That is a big opportunity, as are certain audiences that are maybe underserved, which domestically. So that is one way that we tell people they can grow, is give us more lead time, know your audience, leverage your audience, price it appropriately, and look beyond your borders, because it's a big world out there, and streaming makes it quite small and easy to reach.
This might be a flip side of the coin, or a similar question, but our audience for this panel is a mix of brands or advertisers, agencies, publishers, platform operators. So it's a very broad group and a very broad topic. But what's one common challenge, other than COVID, which is everybody's challenge, that you think everyone visiting this Zoom room or watching this panel will need to focus on in 2022? Justin, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I think, right, if we think about everyone as a marketer, right, because we're all trying to reach an audience and tell them better. Whereas I think if we think about what's happening, obviously through our lens on television, the question that we get most, and the thing I think that we need to kind of talk about a lot and give advice to, is the fact that clients and folks like the audience here are looking for incremental reach. To John's point earlier, the pay TV bundle is not going away, right? It reaches a mass audience, but what's happening is the audience that tunes in to linear television is very fractured. So if you look at the time spent viewing, across terciles, or just split the audience into equal thirds, light television viewers, those lightest 1/3 viewers, they're spending 1 hour to 2 hours watching linear television per week. Right? They're tuning into an episode, they're tuning into one of their favorite shows on John's networks, and then they're finding something else. They're going to Vivo through the app. So the challenge is not just thinking about outside of those, the cord. It's not just the uncorded. It really is kind of scaling across all of the ways that the fragmented audience on television, because it is still the best screen in the household. It is still the best place to put your sight, sound, and motion, messaging out to a large audience. And it's just the managing of how to find that audience.
And I would echo those thoughts from Justin and Marie, in that what I hear most from advertisers is the struggle to reach a scaled target. And if you go back 25 years, these ratings were almost 10 times the size of what they are today. So today a 0.7 is considered a successful show. 5 years ago, you might have needed a 4 or a 5 to get there. So the challenge I think we hear from advertisers is, with all of the fragmentation from people on this panel that are taking time away from what used to be the biggest game in town, broadcast and cable networks, to the streaming services not running ads. The 3 biggest streaming services, Amazon, Disney Plus, Netflix, not an ad to be had. And then when you get further down the line, you start seeing hybrids, Hulu being the biggest of the hybrids. But it's difficult for the advertisers to reach their targets when there's so much fragmentation, and some of these streaming services are either running no ads or light ads. So how do you re-aggregate all of that reach? There's a shortage of ad impressions. Believe it or not, there's a shortage of ad impressions in the video space.
I mean, can the media economy sustain this level of competition in the video space, in the audio space, in the streaming space? Who's going to win in the end? What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, there is, I'm not sure if it's as well known as the video space, but there's quite a bit of players in competition in audio world too. And all with, sort of similar approaches. And certainly there are some very big global players and there are some US only players. But I think as time goes on, to answer your question directly, Anne-Marie, there will be some contraction and some consolidation here. I think there has to be. Consumers have a lot of choice these days. The bigger players are frankly eating more than they ever have. And so I think if you look into the next 5 years, perhaps it's 10 years, you will see. I don't know if there's half the players that there are today, but I think there certainly will be a smaller group than there are today.
Mhm. And let's talk a bit about revenue, because obviously it's all comes down to that. What kind of changes do you see, first of all, in advertising in 2022? And are there any new sources of revenue that your companies are looking at, or other ways to monetize audiences? Natalie, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's still so much opportunity, especially in the CTV space around fast channels. I think we're still in early days around the growth there. I think you're going to start to see more specialization of channels there, whether it's, for us, it's decades channels or specific, specific television series have their own 24/7 curated channel. That I think that's just going to continue to expand. I think the other area is ad formats. I think we're going to start to see some unique ad formats in that market. I know we're getting ready to announce some in the coming year, but I think there's still opportunity for expansion. I agree that I think long term, maybe the number of platforms that you access your content on might go down, but I think the personalization or the number or different ways that you can consume that content or the amount that's available to you will continue to expand.
Kim, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with what everyone has been saying, really. I don't think there's anyone I would, fight on this panel saying, I don't agree with that. In fact, even though we're known for pay-per-view and we're launching a fast channel this year too. And someone had brought up NFTs earlier. We've already dipped our toe into that world as well. I think that there will be some consolidation overall, but I think that there's going to be many new things that maybe haven't even been discovered yet that could be huge next year. So you got to stay awake, I guess, and try a bunch of new things.
It's interesting to have this discussion with this group and think of it from a consumer's perspective. So from a consumer perspective, that your wallet has been stretched to include so many subscriptions. So which ones are you going to pay for? You're on the one hand talking about fragmentation being a challenge to revenue and fragmentation being a challenge to scale, to offering scale to advertisers. On the other hand, it's look out, consumer, there's more coming at you, right? Because as we're trying to think of new ways to create revenue, we're thinking of new activities for the consumer's eyeballs, engagement, and attention. So, I mean, from a consumer point of view, what is this all going to look like in a decade or 2 decades? Like, what does 2050 look like? Is it going to be this consumer backlash where we're all going back to reading hard copy books, which I did over the vacation and forced my children to do? Or is it, or is it going to be Blade Runner? Can we just stretch the consumer more and more and more to meet all of the demanding options we're putting out there?
That's a huge question, and it's kind of fun to think about. But I think the point that we have to come back to based on your question is really like the fact that we have to follow the consumers, right? We have to make sure we're serving the consumers with what they want, right? We were talking about fast channels, free ad support, streaming, kind of out of the last question, and that's an innovation in ad revenue because it's a consumer demand, right? Like we just see consumers adopting, basically a new way of consuming linear television, right? It is programmed, it is not as much on demand, and it's a lean back. And in fact, LG Channels, our own fast channel, is the #1 app on LG televisions in terms of minutes per session. It's because it's a lean back, relaxed situation. So I think if we think about 20, 50 years out, I think a lot of what we see right now is ideas being foisted upon consumers. But I think what we really need to do is understand how they're approaching these different innovations, and really kind of pivoting ourselves to that, right? I think that like Twitter, right, is a great example of responding to consumers' needs for that water cooler moment. When you think about television, right, Twitter's the water cooler, and we know that consumers want to talk and want to connect about content. It's just become a little more niche. So I think it's about what's happening for all of us in terms of responding to what those consumers are asking for from us.
I think it continues down the path that we're on right now. For many, many years, people wanted a la carte cable. They wanted to say, there are only 10 channels I watch. I only want to pay for those 10 channels. Charge me a third of what you're charging for the full bundle. So we haven't quite reached a la carte. We may never get to a la carte, but this is company and company and company and company. These are movie studio TV companies like NBC, like Disney, like HBO/Warner, that have built their own streaming services as a reaction to what Netflix was able to do over the last 10 years. So I think the competition will be at the company level, entertainment company versus entertainment company, to see who has the best libraries, original content, technology, marketing, price points, ad loads. That's where we're going. I feel this is year one or year two. I think from 50 to 80, it was all broadcast. From 80 to 20, it was broadcast and cable together. Netflix had about a 10-year head start, but 2020, 2021, 2022, this is the time of streaming. So it's really the third chapter in my career. This is really the third chapter in the television industry. So I think this is where we're going to be for a while.
Well, I started out in newspapers, and when I first heard about Twitter, I could not get my head around it. And now, like everybody else, I live in the social universe. And now a lot of the conversation is about, especially with my friends in gaming, is about how we're all going to be existing in the metaverse. So, where do you think we're going with that? Do you think that, just as the concept of tweeting from the shopping mall seemed foreign to us 25, 30 years ago, are we heading into a future where more and more community and day-to-day activity is going to be happening online?
Yes.
Yes,
And I think we're heading towards a metaverse as well. Some portion of it. It'll be included in the slate, I think, of other things that we do.
I'm interested to hear how companies and how you in your professional lives are talking and thinking about that reality or that eventual reality. Brian, how does it look from the audio world, which is, as you said, kind of a throwback in a renaissance?
Yeah, I look at this probably from two angles, Anne-Marie. One, being in the audio space for so much of my career, but as I mentioned earlier, being at a metaverse augmented reality company for the last sort of 18 months, I really got to look at that world, and it's fascinating. I think there's some players coming at the metaverse. Frankly, it's a little scary when you think of it. It's a little dystopian of being in this world that is not real, and what does that look like? What does that mean for all of us as humans? I mean, we can go on and on about that, but I hope that this metaverse world is sort of this combination of the real world and a digital world. I mean, that's interesting to me, and I think something that we could probably wrap our heads around over the next 5 to 10 years. So it's coming, there's no doubt, right? The infrastructure with 5G, with headsets, both glasses and headwear, that's not 10 years away. That's 2 years away. So I think, brands are really thinking about that. How do they participate in that? Let's face it, right? Brands and marketers gravitate towards what consumers are doing. And we're going to see, as this headwear starts to hit the market this year, frankly, we're going to see some experimentation there. So it's, I guess, one insight I'll share just from being in that world the last year or so, it's real and it's coming. The second, I guess, from the audio perspective is, we're keeping a close eye on it. I mean, it's when you think about where audio has been, from sort of listening to your radio, this one-dimensional experience, and now you've got smart speakers and AirPods and all these different ways on the go that you can consume audio. That's going to evolve in the metaverse. And so all of these companies that are building this headwear are interested in talking to audio platforms to sort of power that audio experience. And so it's a long way of saying we're keeping real close to them. We've got a lot of interest from the metaverse type companies to talk. And I think we can, maybe a year from now, when we're back on this panel, we can update you.
Maybe a year from now, that will be the big disruption that we're talking about. But for now, we need to wrap up. Our time is running out. It went very quickly for me. I hope that you all, there it is, there's the time. I hope that you all enjoyed this lively discussion, and I wish everybody luck and good fortune and good health in 2022. And I hope you ride the wave of disruption and come out on top. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Marie.
Thanks, everybody.